and assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to the second part of exception handling. I am with you, Andy Shajadur Ahmed. So till now we have discussed about what is exception handling, how to use exception handling, what are the classes of exception handling, and what kind of exception handling actually exists in Java. So we have said there are three types of exception handling. One is checked, another is unchecked, another is error, and we have seen some of the classes of exception handling like arithmetic exception, array out of bound exception, null point exception, and so on. So let's start this part. So we'll start this part with flow of control in try-catch block. So first of all, we'll see a scenario when exception does not occur. So this is an example where exception actually not happen. So what will happen? What will be the flow control of the program? Let's see. So there are two integer type variable, and we are actually trying to divide those two variables. As there are no zeros value in the variable, so it will give a output properly. So the system out.print inside the try block, and then we are trying to catch it, and after catching it we are trying to say that it is an exception, and then there will be next statement outside of the try catch. So what will happen? The output should be, because there is no exception happens, so it will execute this line that is inside the block, and then as there are no error or no exception, it will not go to the catch block, it will directly go to the statement after the catch block, which is next statement outside the catch block. So given example, exception does not occur in the try block, so catch block does not run. Now let us see an example where exception will happen. So when exception occurs, so similar kind of examples for the example, but you can see the value of y variable is now 0. That means we are trying to divide a value by 0. So it will be a kind of a kind of exception, and it is actually arithmetic exception. So then if we run this code, there are a catch block, and inside the catch block we are catching the exception and saying that exception occur, and then after the catch block there is a statement, next statement outside the catch block. So what will be the output? Now the output will be the exception occurs, that means the statement inside the catch block and then next statement outside the catch block. So we can say that now we have solved the problem that when a exception occur, the remaining statement after the exception will not execute, but the problem has been solved by using try and catch. So whatever happens in the previous example, we have seen no exception occur, still the next statement execute. In this example we have seen that yes, exception occur, but still the next statement is executed. So this is the benefits of using exception. So there are two statements present here. So hence we can conclude that if an exception occur, then the rest of the try block does not execute. So rest of the means after happening exception in this line, this line will be not executed at all. It will directly move to the because there is a exception here, so it will not execute this line, it will directly move to the catch block, and then will execute the statement in catch block after catching the exception, and after executing the catch block it will execute whatever statement is follows next. So this is what actually happens when we use try catch block. So multiple catch block. So we can also use multiple catch blocks. So what is the benefits of multiple catch blocks? Suppose we said that what kind of exception going to happen, we does not have any idea about it. So we use all kind of exception classes that we know. So that particular case we can use exception multiple catch block. But let me tell you that if we use the parent class, which is just exception, remember from the previous tutorial we have said that exception is parent class, and under the parent class there are all the unchecked exception class and checked exception class. So if we said only exception, then all will going to be covered. But still we need to know what is the basics of multiple catch block. So just first of all try, and then in first catch block it is actually as same as switch. So it is similar to switch. So first of all we test the condition what kind of exception will happen. It will match with the type of exception, and then we'll execute the only the statement of the catch block which match with the exception. For an example, suppose there are exception occur, like we have declared an array, the array size is 2, and then in try block we are trying to access array index 3, but there is no array index 3 in this portion. So what will happen? There will happen a array out of bound exception. So we does not remember, or we does not understand what kind of exception it going to provide. So what we done in first catch block, we said that it can be arithmetic exception. Second catch block we said it can be a array index out of bound exception, and third catch block we said null point exception. So it will execute only those that particular catch block that will match with this condition. So it will match the condition only in this catch block because it is array out of bound. So all other catch block will not execute at all, it will only execute this catch block. So this is a situation, or this is a scenario that can be useful if we does not remember that what kind of arithmetic exception or what kind of exception we need to use. So this can be a solution, and another solution can be just use the parent exception class, which is just exception. So the output should be the array index out of bound, which is actually the statement of this catch block. You can see this catch block have a message, so this message is only executed here. Okay. Now the finally block. So finally block is more than useful when actually there is a code and there some exception can happen. So what is the use of finally block? The finally block allow to try block or a catch block follows try block or catch block. A finally block of code always execute instead of occurrence of an exception. So it is helpful when there are many statements after the try and catch block, and we have a confusion that if the exception does not handle properly, then the remaining code does not execute at all. In that particular point, we can use finally block so that we can make it sure that whatever happens in the try and catch block, the remaining code must execute. So we'll see an example. Using the following finally block allows us to run any statement that you want to execute, no matter what happens in the protect code, that means in the try block. So let us see an example. So syntax of using finally block. So we can use finally block after the try block, or we can see finally block after the try and catch block. There, both are allowed. So particular example. So example 1, using the Java finally. Let us see different case where the Java finally block can be used. So case 1, where exception does not occur. So if exception does not occur, still we can use the finally block. And what will happen if we use? So suppose here is a value, and we are trying to divide 25 with 5, so it will be no exception. So no exception means no catch, but in the finally block we put all the remaining codes, like finally block is always executed and system out.print rest of the code. That means there are a number of lines after the try and catch block, So it will always execute whatever happens. Like in this case, the exception does not happen. So what will be the output? The output is, you can see that we are first of all giving the output of 25 divided by 5. So the output is 5, and then finally block is always executed and rest of the code. So that means finally block also works when there is no exception. So example 2, case 2, when exception occur but does not handle. So suppose exception occurs but does not handle properly and using the finally block. So what will happen? See, now we are trying to divide a value by a 0. So definitely there will be an exception in this line. But in the catch block we said that this is null point exception. But as we know, this should be arithmetic exception. So that means it is not handled properly. So what will happen? It will not provide the certain outputs or certain desired exception message. But still, it does not handle properly. But still, because we have used finally block, the remaining code will execute. So what will be the output? So you can see now there is no output from this calculation, as there will be an error. So first of all, it will say that finally block is always executed, this one, then the rest of the code, and then it will say there will be an error. So in this second case, we seen that exception occurs but not handled properly, but still finally block works. The third case, where exception also occur and properly handled, let's see what finally block does. So similar case, we are trying to divide by 0, so there will be an exception, and now it will not execute this line. It will directly move to catch block, and in catch block we have said that arithmetic exception. So now the exception will match with the class of the exception. So the statement inside the catch block will execute, which is the type of exception happens here, whatever it is, and then it will move forward to finally, and whatever the statement follows in the finally block, it will execute on by. So what will be the output in this case? First of all, it will say what should be the error message and what kind of exception we are having here, and then it will say finally block always used. That means whatever statement follows in the finally block. So we have seen 3 different scenarios. First of all, there are no exception occurs, but still finally blocks actually executing. Then in second case, we have seen that exception occurs but does not handle properly, still finally blocks works. And in third case, we have seen exception occurs, handle properly, and still finally blocks works. That means from this particular 3 example, we have confirmed that whatever happens inside the try catch block, exception occurs or not, handled or not, whatever it is, finally blocks always work. So we definitely need to use whenever we are actually going to handle exception. If there is try catch block, then if there are remaining codes in the program, then please use finally, so that you can confirm that whatever happens, the remaining code will execute. So this is all from exception handling. So I guess you guys now learn how to use exception handling, what is the types of exception handling, and how to properly control the flow of a program. So that's all from this slide. Inshallah, we'll meet in next tutorial. Till then, everyone, stay safe, stay home. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.